He never expected a meal to change everything. Yet the moment the waiter placed the plate in front of him, lobster soaked in rot, the broccoli risotto wilted and cold, a quiet storm began to rise. The dining room, glittering with crystal and polished silver, suddenly lost its warmth. No one spoke at first. Eyes shifted away, some uncertain, others stunned. It was a deliberate insult, of that he had no doubt. But the man at the table, Marcus Bennett, owner and CEO of a thriving tech empire, did not flinch. His gaze, sharp and steady, gave no hint of the tumult simmering beneath. Minutes later, what seemed like a simple dinner on the Sea of Roses would erupt into a confrontation that would ripple far beyond the cruise ship's gleaming decks. Justice, long overdue and fiercely demanded, was about to be served by silence, and then a single voice broke through, steady, resolute, and impossible to ignore. Marcus Bennett adjusts the cuff of his tailored navy jacket as he settles into the plush seat of the Sea of Roses first-class dining room. The scent of jasmine candles mingles with the faint salt air drifting in through the open windows. Around him, the elite passengers sip champagne and engage in polished conversation, the clink of fine china providing the evening's soundtrack. To most, this cruise is a world apart. A floating palace where every whim is anticipated and fulfilled. Marcus chose it for its impeccable reputation and the rare promise of serenity amid years of relentless business battles. But beneath the gleam of crystal and silver, he senses a different undercurrent, one he has learned to read all too well. His server, a young man named Brandon, approaches with a practiced smile. Yet as Brandon places a beautifully plated dish in front of Marcus, lobster tangled with broccoli risotto, the smile falters just a fraction. The lobster's edges are dull, the risotto appears soaked and limp, the vibrant green of the broccoli faded to sickly yellow. Marcus's eyes narrow, but his voice remains calm. "Excuse me, this lobster, it doesn't look right." He gestures subtly as if to steady the scene, but the dish says everything without a word. Brandon offers a tight-lipped apology and quickly retreats. Murmurs ripple through the nearby tables. Some watch with curiosity. Others busy themselves with their meals. The room's polite hum stiffens. Marcus knows this isn't accidental. He pulls out his phone discreetly, opening a dedicated app he developed for his own security and oversight on ventures like this cruise line. Cameras embedded around the dining room capture every angle, every glance, every whisper. The rest of the dinner unfolds beneath the heavy tension of Brandon's deliberate neglect. When Marcus decides to confront, quietly, firmly, with the weight of decades forged in boardrooms and back alleys of corporate America, the ripple becomes a wave. Later, as the ship docks, the confrontation finds a decisive end. Brandon's career, like his pretense of politeness, crumbles in the face of undeniable truth and unshakable dignity. Marcus Bennett sits poised, the polished surface of the mahogany dining table, before reflecting the gleam of crystal glassware and the flickering candlelight. Outside, the ocean stretches endlessly, moonlight slicing through the rolling waves like a promise of calm. Yet tonight, in this room reserved for the affluent and the powerful, tranquility feels as elusive as distant stars. He studies the faces around him, the laughter and light chatter, people wrapped in their privileged bubbles, many oblivious, a few knowingly complicit. His own presence here is not just a quiet indulgence, but a probe into an unseen layer beneath the ship's elegance, the prejudices that still linger like sediment under the surface. When Brandon, the waiter with the rehearsed smile but eyes shadowed by something colder, appears with Marcus's entree, the scene shifts. The lobster, once an image of opulence and care, lies defeated on the plate, its shell dulled, its sweet promise turned bitter by neglect. The broccoli risotto beside it is soggy, the bright green stalks almost unrecognizable beneath a film of unappetizing moisture. Marcus's breath slows, measured and steady. The room holds its breath with him. "Excuse me," Marcus says, his voice a calm blade slicing through the murmurs. "This lobster, it is spoiled." The words fall into the silence, but their weight reverberates. Brandon's face tautens, embarrassment or guilt or perhaps something darker. He mutters an apology, eyes flickering toward the other tables where watchful eyes have already caught the exchange. The restaurant's manager, a woman named Evelyn Brooks, approaches swiftly. Her controlled smile masks the tension creeping into the air. "Mr. Bennett, we pride ourselves on impeccable service. Let me rectify this immediately." But as Marcus watches Brandon disappear into the kitchen, he knows this is more than a culinary mistake. It's a hostile message hidden beneath a veneer of civility, an attempt to remind him subtly but surely of where they believe he doesn't belong. The first course sets the tone for the night. Every detail, served cold, delayed, denied the attention others receive, speaks a quiet cruelty. Yet Marcus holds himself with the dignity forged by years of overcoming such invisible battles. His tablet glows softly on the table, discreetly connected to the ship's surveillance system, silently chronicling every slight. Across the room, a few passengers glance toward him, some with empathy flickering in their eyes, others with calculated indifference. The difference in treatment is glaring. Marcus's thoughts drift briefly to the early days of Bennett Technologies, built from a small apartment into a powerhouse disrupting markets, shattering expectations, and crossing invisible racial lines. None of that hard-won success has prepared him for this meal. The waiter returns with a fresh plate, this time just as meticulously crafted, but no better in substance. The risotto is overcooked, the lobster lacking flavor and freshness. When Marcus raises the issue again, Evelyn's demeanor tightens. "These are the best ingredients available today. We ask for your understanding." Understanding, Marcus realizes, is a currency not afforded equitably. Silent exchanges ripple behind closed kitchen doors. Whispers of doubt, judgment, dismissal form invisible barricades around him. Yet his resolve remains unshaken. Later, when Marcus calls upon Evelyn for a meeting away from the dining room, the undercurrents of tension surface further. His tone stays soft but firm. This isn't just about a meal. It's about respect and dignity. Every guest deserves that. Her professional facade falters for a heartbeat, revealing the slightest trace of recognition, an unspoken acknowledgement of the divide he continually bridges. Hours later, as the Sea of Roses nears its next port of call, the events set in motion ripple outward. The room will witness a quiet reckoning. Brandon's deliberate slight, the restaurant's quietly shifting alliances, and Marcus's calm but unyielding leadership all converge. When dockside officials and company executives are alerted, decisions are swift but carefully calculated. Brandon's suspension, followed by an immediate dismissal, arrives not in a quiet whisper but in the public eye. Faces in the dining room watch as justice, long delayed for many, is served with clarity. Marcus stands not just as a man wronged, but as a beacon for change. The Sea of Roses may be a world of beauty and privilege, but it cannot hide the shadows of prejudice forever. Tonight, those shadows are finally challenged. As twilight deepens, the luxurious interior of the Sea of Roses feels both timeless and charged with unspoken tension. Marcus sits, every detail of the grand dining room etched into his memory, the glint of crystal, the soft murmur of conversations punctuated with laughter, the rustle of silk dresses and tailored suits gently swaying in rhythm with the ship's gentle sway. This stage, so exquisitely set for leisure, holds the silent weight of the battle being quietly waged. In the coming hours, the room will witness a story far beyond what its opulent trappings suggest. A story of small acts and sharp edges, where dignity clashes with prejudice beneath the polished veneer of first-class luxury. Brandon's service continues to falter, and though his expressions are practiced to Marcus, every hesitated glance, every subtle withdrawal of warmth speaks louder than words. The waiter's casual neglect, delayed drink refills, The impersonal delivery of dishes unravels the illusion that all patrons are welcome as equals. At one moment, Marcus catches Brandon leaning close to a fellow server, whispering just out of earshot, but his gaze flicks uncomfortably towards Marcus's table. The cruel implication hangs in the air, unheard by most but deeply felt by Marcus. He doesn't confront rage or anger. Instead, he summons a patience honed from decades maneuvering through corporate battles and societal scorn. This battle, as with so many before, requires precision, evidence, and quiet fortitude. Across the room, the head waiter, Evelyn Brooks, brings a younger woman with her, a guest relations officer named Sarah. Her presence introduces a new element, oversight, infused with the thin veneer of diplomacy. Evelyn's smile never wavers as she addresses Marcus with the careful charm of the industry. "Mr. Bennett, your experience is important to us. Please allow us to make this right," she says, eyes kind but betraying a trace of corporate calculation. Marcus nods solemnly. Words alone cannot repair what has been disrupted. Outside, the night deepens. The ocean swells with gentle rhythm, unaware of the storm brewing inside. Marcus finally receives a replacement dish, a lobster prepared anew, the risotto steaming and vibrant. He tastes with measured hope, but a flicker of doubt lingers beneath every bite. More than food is at stake here. A brief lull offers Marcus a quiet moment to reflect. His phone vibrates softly, an encrypted message from his executive assistant, Lila. "Board is watching closely. Let me know if you need backup. Backup is not just about power. It is about justice, accountability, and the chance to open eyes long closed to uncomfortable truths." The murmurs begin to rise, not just around the dining room but across the ship. People notice the awkwardness, the charged glances, the subtle gestures that fracture the calm surface. Marcus senses a tide turning, slowly gathering momentum with the power to alter the course of this evening, and perhaps more. Later, when the meal service ends, Marcus requests a private meeting with the ship's management. It is no longer merely about the meal, but about confronting patterns of exclusion that linger like shadows in places supposedly defined by luxury and grace. The tension between polished smiles and simmering unease reaches a crescendo. When Marcus calmly recounts the evening's events, every slight, every whispered insult, every compromised plate, the room listens, slowly unraveling the layers of denial that shield complicity. It is in this quiet confrontation that the real work begins. The waiter's deliberate actions have ignited a reckoning. Brandon is called aside, his demeanor shifting from arrogance to apprehension as the severity of the situation dawns. Inside the ship's command center, surveillance footage plays, each moment, each exchange, laying bare the truth that polite facades sought to obscure. The footage is undeniable evidence, a mirror reflecting bias and injustice. Hours later, as the Sea of Roses approaches its port, Marcus stands watched not only by crew and management, but by the passengers who witnessed the unfolding drama. The dignity with which he carries himself, even as the hostile undercurrents threaten to overwhelm, is a testament to resilience. The announcement comes by ship's intercom. Brandon's immediate suspension pending a full investigation. Whispers swell into conversations into quiet resolve. Change, once distant and intangible, takes its first tentative steps on the polished decks of the Sea of Roses. As the stars glitter above, Marcus's gaze drifts to the horizon. Tonight was never just about a spoiled lobster. It was about standing firm in the face of exclusion and reminding the world that dignity cannot be denied. The Sea of Roses sails onward, but the tides of justice have shifted, and no pretension can calm the waves that follow. Night deepens over the vast expanse of the ocean, the sky a velvet canvas smeared with constellations. Inside the grand ballroom of the Sea of Roses, the atmosphere simmers with an invisible tension. Marcus Bennett stands near the tall arched windows, his silhouette outlined by the moonlight dancing on the waves. The rhythmic pulse of the ship's engines hums through the polished decks, a steady cadence contrasting with the turmoil inside his mind. The memory of dinner lingers vividly, a lobster dish once a symbol of indulgence and refinement, now a stark emblem of exclusion and disrespect. The unspoken message behind the wilted broccoli risotto and the dull, cold shell was unmistakable. Acceptance here is not universal. His presence, despite his accomplishments and stature, seemed to unsettle those whose privilege rests on selective inclusion. Marcus exhaled slowly, eyes closing for a brief moment. The Sea of Roses glides unhurriedly through the water, carrying not just passengers, but the weight of unspoken histories. All around him is beauty and elegance, but beneath the gilded surface lie centuries-old prejudices, wrapped in silk and silver. Voices flit through his memory, soft whispers of sympathy from some passengers, evasive glances from others. The divide between acknowledgement and denial is razor-thin. Some faces offer quiet solidarity, a subtle nod, eyes that shimmer with kinship and sorrow, while others retreat behind polite smiles and severed connections. As he returns his gaze to the present, a gentle tap interrupts his reverie. Eleanor Hale, a woman with silver hair worn like a crown and eyes bright with empathy, approaches. Her manner is graceful, her presence grounding. "Mr. Bennett," she begins carefully, her voice a hushed melody in the tense room. "What occurred this evening shouldn't have happened to anyone. Your courage in facing it?" It spoke volumes. Marcus nods in silent thanks, warmed by her sincerity. In her eyes he sees a mirror reflecting shared understanding, recognition of the unseen battles fought daily by those too often marginalized, even in places gilded with luxury. The evening's events have awakened beneath the surface a subtle, gathering unrest, a ripple spreading quietly but steadily through the opulent corridors of the ship. Later, behind closed doors, the ship's management converges in a room where decisions are weighed under low light and heavy silence. Evelyn Brooks, the restaurant manager, leans forward, eyes sharp and voice laden with necessity. This cannot be allowed to escalate into a scandal, aware of its reach far beyond what we can contain, Evelyn asserts with measured certainty. But turning a blind eye would be worse. Marcus Bennett is not just a passenger. He's a figure whose voice carries influence. The footage from our surveillance is clear, and we owe it to our patrons to act. Captain Morgan Trent, bearing the stern demeanor of a man responsible for all aboard, nods solemnly. Reputation is fragile. Suspension is warranted, perhaps dismissal. But we must also prepare to shield the company's standing. Diane Pierce, head of guest relations and master of measured words, folds her hands thoughtfully. Controlling the narrative is crucial, but an attempt to bury this will only fuel speculation and distrust. Transparency balanced with accountability is our best course. Meanwhile, the ship pulses with life. Marcus returns to his suite to find a series of encrypted messages from his close confidants, legal counsel, board members, and trusted allies. Each message is a thread in the tightening net of support, advice, and strategic thinking. The issue transcends a single meal. It cuts to the core of systemic inequalities reflected in places that otherwise celebrate exclusivity and grandeur. The challenge is far from merely culinary. This is a reckoning with history, prejudice, and the resilience required to confront them. Later in the evening, Michael Perez arrives unannounced at Marcus's door. A seasoned executive and observer with a penchant for truth-telling, Michael's presence is refreshing amidst the tension. "Marcus," he begins, leaning in as the door clicks softly behind them. "Your grace tonight was unmistakable. But be wary. This ship and its crew navigate waters deeper and darker than these waves. There are currents of resistance to change you won't see until you feel their pull." Marcus allows a faint smile to touch his lips, appreciation flickering in his eyes. "I've weathered more turbulent storms on land than this ocean, but your warning is noted. Thank you." As dawn's pale light creeps slowly across the horizon, the ship draws closer to port. Silence in the corridors amplifies the gravity of the unfolding drama. News of Brandon's suspension, swift and decisive, finds its way through the staff and passengers, despite efforts to keep the matter discreet. Whispers become cautious conversations in corridors and lounges. The careful facades of luxury begin to fracture under the weight of acknowledgement. In the ship's salon, a mosaic of passengers gathers, not just idle tourists, but influential figures whose lives intersect in this floating city. Among them, Robert Wells, a man whose decades at sea have made him a keen observer of human nature, breaks the hush. "I have witnessed many things vetting countless voyages," Robert's voice rumbles with quiet authority, "but never so blatant a rejection of a fellow traveler's humanity. Tonight I saw something that should haunt us all." Tara, a younger traveler with eyes bright from a lifetime of silent endurance, shares her own story. The microaggressions, the dismissals, the whispered apologies that leave wounds unseen. "These moments," she says softly, "they accumulate. They mold the shape of invisibility for so many of us." Their voices blend into a slow crescendo of shared pain and rising hope, drawing various perspectives into a conversation no longer polite, but necessary and raw. Across the ship, in the conference suite where damage control is masterminded, Diane Pierce crafts statements with a delicate balance of promise and caution. Their message is clear: zero tolerance, transparency, and the commitment to change. But the wheels turn slowly. Unease gnaws at the edges of the polished announcements. The legal precautions, the unspoken worry that true transformation requires more than words. In the quiet sanctuary of his suite, Marcus contemplates the paradox. Fighting for justice often means navigating invisible storms, far more relentless than any sea tempest. "Tonight is a beginning," he murmurs to the darkened room, a pact to himself, not an end. Outside, the Sea of Roses presses forward upon the dawn-touched waves, carrying a shipload of hopes tangled with challenges, splintered truths, and the fragile promise of renewal. The dialogue has only just begun. The course ahead is uncertain, but Marcus is ready. The next hours on board the Sea of Roses feel suspended in a liminal space between calm and storm. Passengers move about with a heightened awareness, as if the elegant corridors have been stretched taut by unseen tension. Whispers swirl around crescent tables and beneath crystal chandeliers, the quiet pulse of collective reckoning. Marcus walks through the ship's lounge, the low murmur of conversations wrapping around him like shadows. Strangers turn their heads with knowing looks. Allies reveal themselves through brief nods or cautious smiles. Even amidst the glitter of opulence, he senses the ripple effect of tonight's encounter is profound. In quiet moments that follow, Marcus pens a message to his board chairperson. "Today's events a mirror to challenges beyond this cruise. This is just the first of many steps." Lila's fast reply, "Standing with you. Let's use this." As the ship nears port, the crew make final preparations for the next phase. Diane Pierce meets privately with Evelyn Brooks and the captain, strategizing ways to rebuild trust while balancing transparency with discretion. In the guests' quarters, hushed discussions continue. Passengers from all walks share candid reflections on how the evening has shifted their understanding, not just of Marcus's experience, but of their own complicity or comfort in the face of exclusion. Robert Wells revisits his memories, comparing tonight's raw injustice with countless past voyages. "This," he says quietly to Tara, "is an awakening. One of many we'll need to face if we hope to sail towards something better." Before the ship docks, Marcus prepares to address the passengers, a decision born from both responsibility and hope. He stands before the crowd in the main lounge, his voice calm but resonant. "We each carry burdens visible and invisible," he begins, "and while tonight's injustice was personal, it's also universal. It's a call for courage, for change, and for all of us to rise." The room holds its breath. For many, this moment crystallizes an urgent truth. Privilege must be examined, exclusion confronted, dignity reclaimed. As applause rises, Marcus feels a bittersweet blend of exhaustion and resolve. The path ahead is uncertain, but tonight a seed has been planted, a quiet promise that with every voice raised in truth, the tides can shift. The first light of dawn casts a pearly glow over the endless ocean, the sea of roses gently rocking in rhythm with the waves. Inside the ship, a palpable sense of anticipation lingers, as if the vessel itself holds its breath, waiting for the unfolding of what must come next. Marcus Bennett stands in the main lounge, a figure both composed and resolute. The weight of the previous night's ordeal presses on his shoulders, not as a burden, but as a mantle of responsibility. Every set of eyes in the room is drawn to him. Passengers, crew, executives, their expressions a mixture of apprehension, respect, and quiet hope. It has been hours since the disgraceful meal in the ship's elegant restaurant, the lobster rotted from neglect, the once vibrant broccoli risotto sogged and spoiled, which ignited the series of events shaking the sea of roses to its core. The blatant prejudice displayed by Brandon, the waiter whose smile had been a mask for disdain, has been met with undeniable consequences. Brandon's suspension was swift, his removal from the ship stark and silent. The man's ego, once as sharp and polished as the silverware he wielded, now lay broken, crushed beneath the overwhelming truth of his actions, broadcast to management and crew alike. Diane Pierce, the head of guest relations, stands near the gangway coordinating the arrival of company officials, legal advisors, and human resources personnel. The evidence they bring is meticulous. Surveillance footage, written statements, audio recordings, all painting a damning portrait of intentional mistreatment. Marcus watches silently as Brandon walks past for the last time, escorted by stern-faced security. His gaze meets Marcus's briefly, an unspoken acknowledgement of defeat and irrevocable change. Marcus turns away, knowing the victory is not personal alone but symbolic of something far greater. The main lounge fills with murmurs as passengers gather once again, drawn by the gravity that now permeates the ship's atmosphere. Faces shimmer with an uneasy mix of emotions, disbelief, empathy, curiosity, and for some, a stirring resolve to confront their own complicity in systemic exclusion. When Marcus steps forward to address them, the room hushes, the weight of silence compressing the space like thick velvet. "Friends," Marcus begins, his voice steady but warm. "Tonight I stood in a place meant for comfort and celebration. Instead I was served not just spoiled food, but a reminder of invisible barriers that persist." He pauses, allowing his words to settle. This moment was painful, but it is also a summons to all of us to recognize these fractures within our communities, within our workplaces, and within ourselves. He looks around the room, meeting eyes, feeling the shared resolve flicker through the gathered crowd. Our dignity is not owed by privilege, it is a right inherent to every person. And while this night's events were personal, they reflect a universal struggle, one that demands courage, conviction, and collective action. The applause that follows is no mere politeness, but heartfelt. A ripple of solidarity spreads as voices join in a quiet chorus of change. Among those standing nearby, Eleanor Hale steps forward, her sharp gaze softer with empathy. "Let tonight remind us all of our shared humanity," she says. "Let us challenge the unseen walls with open hearts and minds." Small groups form, passengers from varied backgrounds exchanging stories, ideas, and plans. What began as a moment of confrontation flows into a space for connection and collective healing. Behind the scenes, the ship's leadership confronts the implications with newfound honesty. Evelyn Brooks and Captain Morgan Trent discuss revising training and service protocols, determined to root out prejudice and foster inclusivity at every level. Diane Pierce signals to the legal and HR teams to fast-track leadership sessions on diversity, equity, and inclusion. The promise is clear. This incident will not be an isolated blip, but a catalyst for deep institutional change. In his suite, Marcus reflects late into the night. The ship outside seems calm, but he senses the tides of transformation have begun to turn. The journey he envisioned, of justice and equity, is arduous but no longer distant. He picks up his phone, fingers lingering over the keys before sending a message to his closest allies. We begin here. The fight is long, but we rise. Morning follows with a gentle breeze. On the deck, Marcus feels the sea air fill his lungs, the horizon vast and promising. As the Sea of Roses resumes its voyage, the story emanates beyond its decks, spreading in conversations, igniting awareness. Weaving through communities hungry for change, Marcus holds hope close. The memory of the spoiled lobster, transformed into a symbol of resilience and renewal. And now, as the narrative draws to a close, the story turns to you, the listener. What would you have done in Marcus's place? How do you face indignity when cloaked in subtlety or brazen bias? Share your voice below. Your perspective is part of the unfolding story. If this journey moved you, consider joining us by subscribing. Together we navigate the waves of justice and dignity,